Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Hari Om Gurubhyo Namah, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Friends, Namaste. On behalf of Team Param Vedanta, I extend one and all a hearty welcome for today's closing or concluding class for both verse by verse and DISHA series. Why should we welcome difficulties, trials, and tribulations? An excerpt I would like to share from a discourse, a loving reminder I wish to recall. Life or samsara is filled with dualities, likes, dislikes, good, bad, union, separation, etc., etc., which is compared to an ocean with waves constantly bringing about union and separation. The very same ocean also contains pearls, precious gems, just as this samsara. Man is born ignorant, just as a diamond's value is enhanced after it undergoes the process of cutting and polishing. Gold ore mined from earth undergoes melting and purification to attain its value, to elevate our lives from trivial to the sublime, and to discover, as Swami Paramarthanandaji says, dissing the cover is discovering, for which sadhana is necessary. Today, in this concluding session of verse by verse Bhagavad Gita and DISHA, Dr. Timmappa Hegde sir shall talk on the greatness of Gita, and the second topic he'll speak on is Gita is Upanishad Sara. Sri Ullas will address the impact of Gita in our daily life. Dr. Sundar will talk on syndrome of raga, shoka, moha, and significance of sharanagati. Dr. Anupama will speak on the Sthita Prajna, yogi, gnani, parabhakta, and lakshanani. Dr. Divakar Gautam, Tatparyam, the central message of Gita. And lastly, Dr. Sanjay Mehrotra will speak on the sadhanas that are glorified in the Gita. Before handing over to Dr. Timmappa Hegde sir, I would like to make an important announcement. To commemorate Guru Purnima, we shall be having a physical satsang and broadcasting the same on Monday, 3rd July. Details of the satsang shall be shared in our groups, including Telegram. Do not miss joining us to celebrate and express our gratitude to our Gurus. Now I request Dr. Timmappa Hegde sir to take over, please.
Thank you very much, Shivkumar. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. It is such a wonderful coincidence that we have come to the conclusion of our 2-year-old Bhagavad Gita verse by verse and our DISHA study on the eve of Guru Purnima. Today, on a very special session, we will look at the various aspects of the Bhagavad Gita, and the first session will be on the greatness of the Bhagavad Gita. What is so great about the Bhagavad Gita? Our scriptures, the Vedas, are voluminous. Adi Shankara, in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, has said that the study of the Bhagavad Gita is as good as studying the entire Vedic literature, because the Gita is a wonderful summary of the entire Vedic knowledge in 700 verses. Bhagavad Gita is part of Vyasacharya's Mahabharata. And it was Adi Shankara who discovered this jewel within the Mahabharata and took it out as a separate scriptural work for all of us. The Gita is in the form of a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, representing all of us. Just as democracy is of the people, for the people, and by the people, so too the Gita is composed by a householder, Vyasacharya, for a householder, all of us, represented by Arjuna, delivered by a householder, none other than Lord Krishna. It is a user's manual, as we can clearly see, for people who are steeped in worldly issues and who are also overwhelmed by worldly issues. The Tathparyam, as we will see in today's talk of the entire Bhagavad Gita, is Tattvamasi. Tattvamasi is a Mahavakya that comes in the Chandogya Upanishad, which means our essential nature is already divine. Which means the fact is we are already that which we can possibly be. Swami Paramarthananda ji in his introduction says, he gives an example. Supposing your water tank, overhead water tank is full of water, but when you open the tap, you're not able to get any water. There must be only one problem. There must be some obstruction in between. So the Bhagavad Gita, although we are already that, we are the Mahavakya Tattvamasi, we are divine. We are not able to experience that. It is because of various obstacles. And again, in today's talk, we will have these various sadhanas, which we'll be talking about, which will be elaborated. And the three obstacles, and you will see all these obstacles are there in the human mind. And they are called mala, or there is a basic impurity in the mind. And the mind has a glue, tend to attach itself to something that it likes. And that is what is called kama. And from kama comes a whole cascade, kama, krodha, lobha, mada, matsarya. Secondly, our mind can be compared to a monkey, very restless. And therefore, there are various sadhanas which will help us to overcome this restless mind, that is Upasana Yoga. For the impurity, we have Karma Yoga. And the third problem of our mind is we are born with the capital of ignorance. We have ignorance of everything, including our true nature. And the answer to that is through Jnana Yoga. How is this brought about in the Bhagavad Gita? Those who have studied the Bhagavad Gita and have made commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita have discovered a wonderful pattern called shatkams, or groups of 6. Prathama Shatkam, the first 6, Madhyama Shatkam, the next 6, and the Antima Shatkam, or the Charama Shatkam, the last 6. And these 3 sadhanas, Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, respectively come in these 3 shatkams. The first shatkam talks about our true nature and addresses the Tvam part of the Mahavakya, whereas the second shatkam discusses the nature of God, or Tat Padartha, and the final shatkams will talk about the Asi Padartha. Personal growth in all aspects has been an area of great interest for me. And it so happened that few years ago, when I was invited for a Gita Jnana Yajna, and I thought I was supposed to speak on the Gita, I realized I knew nothing worth talking about. This forced me to make a systematic study of the Bhagavad Gita, and I can see what a transformation from ignorance to a certain understanding of this great scriptural text. In my own experience, and you can share this experience too, that Gita is a seeker's stop. Soon I realized that no book, no author that I had studied so far had such a transformative effect as the Bhagavad Gita had. And this is our collective experience, that each time we study the Bhagavad Gita, the same verse has a much deeper impact. And often you will wonder, how is that I did not see this about it last time? So what's so great about the Bhagavad Gita? The Bhagavad Gita is just not any ordinary text. It is scripture. And scripture means gospel. It is spelled out by God. And therefore, it requires a certain amount of basic qualifications to be a student of the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, in the concluding verses in the 18th chapter, Sri Krishna enumerates. He wants all of us who have studied the Gita to share this with those who may not know about the Gita. He wants all of us to introduce the Gita to others. But he said, don't do this for anybody. To people who have tapaha. Tapaha means a certain amount of austerity. For those who are able to or willing to lead a relatively simple life, for whom there is an innate amount of bhakti, Shushrusha, that means who is willing to listen, and of course, one who is not going to be critical or anasuya. The Bhagavad Gita is in Sanskrit, and therefore, because our Sanskrit knowledge is limited, and it is also poetry. It is beautiful poetry. It can be sung. There are various ways to study the Bhagavad Gita. One is to really see it as a musical composition, learn the Bhagavad Gita, learn how to chant. And then this is how the scriptures were initially taught. It was expected that all students would memorize the text, and then the teacher would be able to explain. The Gita has to be studied under the guidance of a very qualified teacher. We will also see in today's class how Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogda Gopala Nandana. Sri Krishna has been a very skillful cowherd, if I can say, who has extracted the essence of the Upanishads and presented in a musical form in the Bhagavad Gita. Let us be very clear why we study any scriptural text. We are not here to say, I have studied the Gita, have a certain scholarship of the Bhagavad Gita. These are scriptures for us to attain the Parabhak Purushartha or moksha. Swamiji repeatedly says this: moksha is possible only through jnanam or self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is possible only if we are ready to make a self-inquiry. Self-inquiry is possible only through Vedanta Vichara. And Vedanta Vichara is possible only through Guru Shastra Upadesha, which is a study of the Bhagavad Gita, or the opening will be the study of the Bhagavad Gita. When those of us who have been exposed to the Bhagavad Gita, and this Bhagavad Gita in the 7th chapter will say, Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye. Of the thousands and thousands of human beings, we are those fortunate ones who have been able to get this wisdom of the Gita. But then the question is, yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam veti tatvatah. Are we ready to go till the very end? Are we ready to put whatever efforts are there to be able that the Bhagavad Gita has a transformative impact on us? And once transformation happens, I have given this example many times of how countries, cold countries, example Chicago, when it is on a bad winter day, will life go on as normal? And because they anticipate winter, they are prepared for winter. So those of us who need to be prepared for the winter of our lives, the Bhagavad Gita is an excellent manual that will help us in all seasons of our life. This is one of the verses of the Bhagavad Gita which shows the greatness of Sri Krishna, the earnestness with which he concludes his teaching. After giving the teaching and then summarizing it again in the 18th chapter about 4 times. And in the final summary, he gives this, that you need to be a para bhakta, you need to be my bhakta. And then he says, Mam eva ishyasi, you will attain me satyam, te pratijnani priyosvi. You know, you are so dear to me. This is my promise. Be my devotee. You will certainly attain to me. And then finally, Sri Krishna says, Iti te jnanam akyatam guhyat guhyataram maya. I have given you the most sacred, the great secret knowledge. But I want you to analyze it for yourself. But having done so, please do whatever you think is best. And finally, what is that which we are all afraid of? We are all afraid of death. We are all afraid of our death and the death of those whom we love. And Sri Krishna, Adi Shankara in the Bhajagovindam song has said, Bhagavad Gita kincidadhita. If you're able to study the Bhagavad Gita, you will move out from the list of Yama Dharmaraja. You will be free. Thank you very much. We will listen to the next speaker, and that will be Ullas, who will be speaking to us about the impact of Gita in our daily lives. Ullas, please.
Thank you, sir. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. So as Sir told that Gita is such a great book that we have. But let us also examine a little bit that before we look at how much impactful it is, how relevant it is. One might think that why should I go through Gita? This is like a religious book or something. I have already so many issues going on in my life. Why should I go through Gita? So the relevance is, if we are having some of these questions which are true for ourselves, that we are actually battling with active issues in our lives. There are certain challenges that we are going through. Or if we sometimes get confused in what type of decisions I need to take, whether I need to go this way, which is easy, or that way, which is right but hard. Sometimes I question, and every rational mind sooner or later gets to a question: what is the purpose of all of this? Why is life like this? Why is there suffering and all? So there are so many questions that a rational mind gets. And these are all things which are happening in Gita also. It's happening right in the battlefield. It's not given to some kind of a recluse. So it's everything is happening there. And Arjun, who is our representative, he's also confused. He's in the battlefield, but he's confused whether I should fight or not. So he's also in that decision-making dilemma. And then he's saying that what am I going to gain with this war? What is the purpose of all of this? So all these, it makes a very relevant for our study so that we can derive some good insights out of it. So let's see in the next slide that, okay, it is relevant, but is it really impactful? The thing is, Swamiji says that if you would keep boiling down, what is the cause of all our problems? And ultimately it boils down to that it is ignorance. Ignorance of what? Ignorance of reality, of ourself, of the self-knowledge we don't have, that who we really are. Many times we think that when I say I, then it means all my family or all this, my body or all my possessions. But if we will keep analyzing on it, then we'll soon realize that I have a layer of mind also. I have a layer which is always through there, even though everything else changes. So that reality, once we get to know, then a whole lot of things change. Once we don't have that reality check or that ignorance, it's like we have some certain colored glasses on our eyes. And once we have those, then we'll see the entire world with that color only. And if someone comes and tells us, no, the world is not brown as you have put your glasses on, we would not even believe. The only way is to remove those glasses. And Gita is that book which would break those glasses or remove those glasses from our eyes, which will make us realize that that ignorance was the false thing. And then there is something beyond. So we need to have that shraddha, that faith. And then only once we get into it, then it will really impact our lives, because it will clarify our wrong notions. All things get resolved by making our vision correct, our attitude towards looking at things correct. And this Gita is really going to help there. And it says that the only impactful solution coming out of ignorance is knowledge. We can do a number of things. Ultimately, they will only be helpful if they're helping us in getting rid of that ignorance through knowledge. Maybe we can do a lot of karma or upasana and meditation, etc. They will all help. But at the end of the day, we need to have that knowledge. That is the one, and Gita is the essence of all the Vedantic knowledge. And so it becomes most impactful work that there is. So in the next slide, we see that ultimately, what is the difference between us and animals? Everything else that the animals do, we also do. The only thing difference is we have that free will, we have that thinking mind. At some point in life, we ask these questions, that who I really am. What is the jiva or self? What is this world about? Because we consider this world to be very real. And it's not that it is unreal, it is like mithya, but we'll get to that. And who is this God? Why is there so much of suffering or bondage in this world? How do I get rid of this? And what exactly is, when we say what is liberation or moksha? All these things ultimately comes to a rational thinking mind. And you will not find answers to these questions anywhere else except for these scriptures. So in the next slide, we would see that what Gita actually talks about. How is it really answering those questions? Now, this is just a summary or like high level essence of what exactly it tells us. The first thing and the foremost tells us that this whole world that we rely on so much is actually impermanent. And what is permanent? So it actually differentiates between the two. That we have been all the time relying on something which is so impermanent, which is so always changing. And if you rely on something changing, then it's like a fool's errand. We have to rely on something which is permanent, which is always going to be there. And then we will be soon uplifted from all the upheavals in life. So the world is very much impermanent. The Atma, which is the subject, which is observing all this, which is making a sense of all this, is the one which is permanent. So rely on that. It talks about self-effort and divine grace. Sometimes we might think that, oh, there is already luck there. Whatever we are doing, it's not in my hands. No, but it says there is a relevance of karma. So there is self-effort, so that we don't become fatalist. Then it also talks about divine grace, that we don't become arrogant also, that everything, whatever is being done is all dependent on me. There are n number of million parameters out there which are impacting anything that I do. So I don't get that arrogance. It talks about karma, meditation, and bhakti, so that I get that cleansed mind. Because once you have that cleansed mind, then only you can focus on learning. And then only that self-knowledge can actualize in you. The thing is, like, we can become erudite scholars, we can learn all the verses of Gita, we can do all those things, but unless our mind is calm and clean, those things will not really make an impact. And that can only happen, like we talk about sadhan chatushtaya sampatti, that comes through those virtues and lifestyles. And all that cleansing that is going to happen is also going to happen with these things. So now we get that emotional strength apart from that just intellectual knowledge to face the world. It also, many times, as Sir just mentioned, that we have that the biggest fear we have is of death, because we think that we are limited in time. There's only so much time that we have got. And all the thing that we try to grab onto things, accumulate more and more, is because we think we are limited in space. We need to make ourselves bigger and bigger. And that is all because of the wrong notion of who I really am. If I think myself of this body or this family, then yes, I am limited in time and space. But once I realize who I really am, which this book helps us to know, then that limitedness would also go away. It tells us that now once I'm not limited, then all I'm doing is for the fun of it, is for the 100% I'll put my time and effort into it, just for the sake of it, not for the results. That karmanye vadikaraste verse is there. That itself is like, if we follow that, then it'll take us a long distance. Then we'll just act as an instrument of God. We'll not become, I have done it. Because once I have that I-ness into any type of action, then I am expecting results, then I'm becoming sad, then I'm becoming happy, then all that merry-go-round goes on. And then I get into the circle of pap and punya, and then punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam. So once we realize these things, then we get rid of that. And in the next slide, we see that now, once we know all this knowledge, now I'm acting through with dharma. Dharma does not mean religion. Dharma means like dharma of fire is being hot. So like that, we also have dharma. We are not as simple as a fire. We are complex beings. So there is defined like what exactly are the things that we must and must not do. We should not do things which are just priya to us. We like them doing. We have to do what we must do, what we ought to do. So those are the shreyas things. So all that dharmic thing is also talked about here. And the most important equipment that we will have with us is, it will allow us to maintain equanimity in all situations. The matra sparshastu konteya thing, that we'll develop that titiksha, and whatever happens, whether it is sukh or dukh, success or failure, all the opposites, relativeness of life is there. It will tell us how we can be equanimous in that. And then once we are equanimous, we will just stand away from it. We'll enjoy all those things, whether it is good or bad in the worldly terms. So let us not keep Gita wrapped in the red cloth in front of our gods or deities. We need to read through it. It has to go through us, and then that impact will really show up. So let's take that pledge today, that we will actually make use of these learnings, and ultimately, we like it or not, it will impact our lives for the positive. Thank you, sir. Hari Om.
Thank you very much, Ullas. We will listen to the syndrome of raga, shoka, and moha, and the significance of sharanagati by Dr. Sundar. Dr. Sundar, please.
Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. We are today concluding two great courses started by Sir, the verse by verse Gita, where we went in a very detailed manner through each verse of the Gita, as well as DISHA, which was more an understanding conceptually, so that we can bring about a transformation in our lives. Today is therefore, in a way, a celebration of this everlasting happiness, which happens to be my core essence, my true nature, not just within me, it is also the true reality outside. In fact, it is the singular or the only reality that is. Everything else is a mere distraction. For a moment,
let us step back to understand what will our lives be without this particular understanding. This is required so that we don't slip from the nididhyasanam that we are regularly doing to abide in this lasting happiness. So if we don't have this understanding, this lasting happiness becomes hidden from us. We have learned already through the Gita that there are layers of mala vikshepa avarana which hide me from this happiness, which actually is my true nature. So what would be my life if I forget this teaching? As we see in this next slide, we start to perceive ourselves as a limited entity. Then we start longing outside, leaning emotionally on this outside world to complete myself, to get a sense of fulfillment, to get that happiness out of situations, people, objects. So these may bring happiness to me. And one might ask, life is good. Why do I need the Gita teaching? As we shall see in this next slide, unfortunately, the outside world is not dependable. None of them, the objects, situations, relationships, are permanent. As Pujya Swami Paramarthanandaji describes, this world is like a cardboard chair. It is good to see, but you cannot really sit on it, meaning you cannot emotionally lean on this world. So this happiness from the outside world is fleeting. There is bound to be periods when I am going to be separated. I am leaning emotionally on this outside world for happiness. There is bound to be separation, which will come now and then. And then we are in trouble. That trouble is what is called as samsara. So one may say, my life is good right now. But the thing is, we have to be intelligent to prepare for the winter of our lives, as Sir said just now. As we shall see in this next slide, in the middle of the first chapter, Arjuna, who came to the battlefield saying life's good, was exposed to this hidden problem of samsara very clearly by the Jagat Guru Sri Krishna, by bringing Arjuna right in front of his dearest teacher Dronacharya and his dearest Bhishmacharya. Arjuna had not yet suffered the loss of them, but even an imaginary loss of his dearest was enough for him to cause this problem. So as we see in this next slide, Arjuna, who was the most ablest among the warriors, becomes depressed, dejected, down on his knees because of this problem of emotional leaning on the outside world for fulfillment, and he is unable to perform his duty. So the first lesson for us here is that we should be alert, wary at all times, not to lean on the undependable outside world for my emotional needs. This is a ticking time bomb. If I have to emotionally lean on the outside for my happiness, peace, or security, is a ticking time bomb. Having understood this lesson, let us briefly know what is this problem of samsara, so that we don't slip from our nididhyasanam. As we see in this next slide, this leaning on the outside world is called as attachment, is called as raga. This is a problem of the emotional mind. The mind, unaware of our true nature, which is everlasting happiness, looks at itself as a small, limited being, and therefore craves for happiness outside of it. So this happened to Arjuna and is indicated by the key word kripaya in this verse. As we see in this next slide, an inevitable consequence of raga or attachment is shoka. For Arjuna, an imagination of loss of his dearest was sufficient to go to soka. Often there is a physical loss as well. Vyasacharya beautifully describes how the intensity of shoka moves from being a mere problem of the mind to a trembling Arjuna who is having horripilation and changes such. The word that signifies shoka was visidan in this key verse. Interestingly, as we see in the next slide, raga shoka then moves on to a terrible delusion of the mind, which is moha. From being an emotional problem of the mind, now it becomes a problem of the rational intellect. This is dangerous because now I start seeing wrong as right. I start seeing adharma as dharma. Arjuna put forth several arguments during the course of the first chapter to justify that although his close and dear relatives were adharmic, he calls them atatais, and yet justifies that we should not kill them. We also see in this next slide that the play of moha on the intellect is such that Arjuna includes Lord Krishna also in his arguments and uses we again and again to suggest even Krishna is deluded. In this next slide, we see Arjuna going through a series of arguments which we may jokingly call as Arjuna's Gita, to suggest that it is okay to be adharmic so that we don't hurt our relatives. So this is demolished, this argument, by Lord Krishna in the beginning of the second chapter. So this is incorrect. So as we see in this next slide, the second lesson, therefore, is that samsara I need to avoid slipping back from my regular nididhyasanam into samsara, because it derails me at both these important steps of my spiritual journey. I am unable to pursue karma yoga. I am unable to pursue jnana yoga also. Therefore, at this juncture, having revisited samsara, let us be firm and steadfast in our nididhyasanam to retain the lasting happiness which we have got at the end of this wonderful course. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sundar, for another masterly work. The proof of Vedanta, the proof of this study of the Gita is Sthita Prajna, Para Bhakta. Dr. Anupama, please.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Who is a Sthita Prajna and what are his characteristics or lakshanani? The synonyms for Sthita Prajna are Sthira Prajna, Sthita Dihi, Brahmi Sthiti, Parabhakta, Jivan Mukta, Jnani, and Samadhistha. In verse 53 here, we see Krishna says, self-knowledge or Atma Jnanam is discovering Purnatvam, which is Nischala, free from all intellectual doubts, or Samshaya Rahita, and Achala, free from emotional bondage. This Jnani's intellect firmly abides in Atma, Samadhau Sthasyati. This knowledge by assimilation or Nididhyasanam becomes his emotional strength. Brahmavit apnoti param. He now is Brahma eva, na Brahmavit. So when he says aham, he means I am Brahman, aham Brahma asmi. I am the original consciousness. What does this word aham mean? It has three meanings. The primary, mukhyartha or vachyartha, is aham, I am, an indistinguishable mixture of Atma, the original consciousness, and Anatma, the reflected consciousness. The two secondary or bhaga, tyaga, lakshyarthas are I am the Atma, the original consciousness, or else I am the upadhi, the tool, the body-mind complex with the reflected consciousness with which I transact in the world. Ajnanis know only the primary meaning. For them, Atma and Anatma are not different. They see one finite, real consciousness, and so we call them mudhas. For example, a rope snake has two components, the mithya snake and the satya rope. The Ajnani is ignorant of its two aspects and he sees nothing other than the snake. Arjuna has heard Krishna says, Yada sthasyati nischala samadhau achala buddhihi tada yogyam avapsyasi. And so he wonders, if a sthita prajna is anchored in his atma, the original consciousness, how does he conduct himself in this world? Arjuna asks Krishna, sthita prajnasya ka bhasa, samadhi tasya keshava, sthita dihi kim prabhasita, kim asita, kim vrajeta. If Ajnani is Brahma Eva, would he still speak, sit and talk like the rest of us do? Now, Arjuna represents all or most of us Ajnanis. When Aham is split into Atma, the original consciousness, and Anatma, the reflected consciousness, and now this Jnani is identifying with the Atma, one naturally wonders, what would the relevance of his body-mind complex and its activities be? We see a Jnani uses the secondary meaning of Aham all the time. He has Atma Anatma Viveka. In Laukika Vyavahara, Aham refers to body-mind complex with Chidabhasa. In Vaidika Vyavahara, Aham is his Chit. This is an intellectual separation. Externally, there is no difference between a Jnani and an Ajnani. He would certainly speak, sit and walk like any of us. But as a Parabhakta, a Sthita Prajna, Krishna says, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan. He becomes Atmani eva Atmana tushta. That means when Prajna or knowledge becomes his emotional strength, Sthita Prajna, he feels a sense of fulfillment and is independent of the external world. All desires vanish, and this Purnatvam leads to Kama Tyaga. Prajahati Sarvan Kaman reminds us of the Taittiriya mantra, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, Yo Veda Nihitam Guhayam, Soshnute Sarvan Kaman, Saha Brahmana Vipaschiteti. This is an oracle which gives us the secret to attain Sarva Kama Tyaga, being Atmani Eva Atmana Tushta, with the aparoksha knowledge of Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma. Being in this state, Atmani Eva Atmana Tushta, a Sthita Prajna enjoys Samatvam or equipoise, Vitaraga or Vairagyam, Abhayam or fearlessness, and very significantly, Rasavarjam Raso Api Asya Param Drishtva Nivartante. This means Atmananda makes all worldly pleasures pale into insignificance, just as stars lose their luster in the presence of sunlight. Krishna then declares, Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha Nainam Prapya Vimuhyati Stitva Asya Antakale Api Brahma Nirvanam Richati. In this state of mind, with this perspective of the world, this Brahmi Sthiti is the Brahma state or Jivan Mukthi. And what is its glory? There is no return to Samsara. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anupama, for giving another wonderful talk on who is a Sthita Prajna. That means, has the spiritual wisdom really entered into one's mind? We will have another talk by Dr. Divakar, who will speak about Tatparyam. What is the central message of the Gita? Dr. Divakar, please.
Hari Om, Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. I will run the risk of repeating myself as the previous speakers have touched on the central message and the teaching of the Gita. But any repetition on Gita and Gita shlokas is worthwhile, as it will only refine us. We know that the teachings in the Bhagavad Gita or the teachings of the Vedas, in particular of that of Upanishads. We will see in the next slide. Sarva Upanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopala Nandana. Sri Krishna has milked the essence of Upanishads and has passionately taught to Arjuna and all of us. So the essence or Tatparya of the Bhagavad Gita is the Tatparya of the Vedanta itself. Therefore, Gita is also called as Gita Upanishad. We know that Vedanta or Upanishads is also called as Jnana Kanda. So it is called as Jnana Kanda because it deals with gnanam. So what gnanam, what knowledge are we talking about? It is the Atma Gnanam or the self-knowledge. And why is the self-knowledge required? Because it is the permanent cure for the self-ignorance. Now, what is self-ignorance? Self-ignorance is the wrong identification of our true nature, as it was already told by the previous speakers. The strong identification with our body mind and saying that it is my true nature is the fundamental cause for all the human sufferings. Vedas call this suffering as samsara. So the strong attachment to the body mind is ahankara, and extending this attachment to other relationships with that of family, other people, possessions, and the power is mamakara. So because of the self-ignorance, which is from our birth, we all have conditioned strong ahankara and mamakara, which is the central cause for samsara, which is nothing but the psychological insecurities and sufferings. The complete liberation from this samsara is called as moksha. And this is the self-knowledge which is dealt in the Jnanakanda. In the next slide, we see, if you remember, there are 4 goals for the human life: artha, kama, dharma, and moksha. Moksha, of course, is the parama purushartha, the supreme goal, and it can be achieved in this life itself. In fact, Shastras say the very reason why a human life is granted is to attain moksha purushartha, and that is exactly what Sthita Prajna does, which Dr. Anupama covered. To help us achieve this moksha purushartha, we are blessed with the most compassionate source of the knowledge, which is nothing but our Shastras, including that of Bhagavad Gita, and also mother-like teachers, the Guru Parampara, which is inclusive of Dakshinamurti, Sri Krishna, to Adi Shankaracharya, to our Swamiji, Swami Paramarthananda ji, etc. Shastras is Shasanat Trayate iti Shastra, that which instructs in the beginning and teaches and protects us like our mother. So Bhagavad Gita, which is the essence of Upanishad Shastras, help us in achieving this moksha in this life itself. And therefore, Bhagavad Gita is called as Moksha Shastra. And how to attain this moksha? The next slide we see, like Vedas, Bhagavad Gita also prescribes 3 sadhanas to attain the moksha. The first sadhana is karma yoga. Again, there is a repetition, but it's worth repeating. This karma yoga helps in removing our impurities in our mind. This helps in destroying our ahankara and mamakara. Once the impurities are removed, then we need to master our mind. For this, upasana yoga is taught, which helps in making our mind more subtler. So the first layer of defect, which is the mind impurity, which is called malam, is removed by karma yoga, which is nothing but Ishvara Arpana and Ishvara Prasada Bhava in all our actions. And then the second layer of mind restlessness, called Vikshepa, is removed by Upasana Yoga. Only after removing this, we can deal with the innermost layer of defect, which is nothing but the self-ignorance or avarana, which is also called as Ajnana. This third layer is removed by Jnana Yoga, which is nothing but learning and abiding to the self-knowledge, which is nothing but Jivatma, Paramatma, Aikya Vichara, or Brahma Jnana Vichara, which is Tat Tvam Asi, that Sir has already talked about. Through this Atma Jnana, we realize that we are not the body-mind, but we are. I am the all-pervading and sentient principle, which is Sat Chit Ananda Atma, which is immortal and that is beyond the space and the time. The next slide we see, any statement of Shastras which reveals the oneness of Sat Rupa Brahman and Chit Rupa Atma is a Mahavakya, like Tattvamasi and Aham Brahmasmi, etc. Some of the Mahavakya mantras in the Bhagavad Gita are verse 7.5, Apareya mitastvanyam prakritim vidhime param Jiva Bhutam Mahabhaho Yayedam Dharyate Jagat Anyam Anyaha Paraha Prakriti, that which is other than the lower perceivable Apara Prakriti is in Jiva Bhutam, in every Jiva, meaning the higher sentient Para Prakriti or Brahman is in every Jiva also. Another verse 7.18, Udara Sarva Evaite Gnani Tvatmaiva Me Matam. Gnani Tvatmaiva Me Matam means Gnani is identical with me, meaning the one who is realized is same as me, which is Jivatma Paramatma Aikyam. Kshetragnam Chapimam Vidhi Sarva Kshetreshu Bharata 13.3. Kshetragna, the one sentient awareness consciousness, is there in all Kshetram, all Jivas. It is identical, and this is the Advaita Atma. So, anchoring to this Aham Brahmasmi Mahavakya, Tattvamasi Mahavakya Gnanam, through Nididhyasanam, a Gnani will become a Mukta. The next slide we see all of this Mahavakya is condensed beautifully in the Charama Shloka, which is the last teaching verse of Bhagavad Gita 18.66. Sarva dharman parityajya mameva sharanam vraja aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshasya yishyami ma shuchaha. Thanks to Swami Paramarthananda ji for clarifying this cryptic shloka. Sarva dharman parityajya is dehabhimana tyaga. In other words, becoming insightful about our true nature, which is Jivatma Swarupa, by disidentifying with body-mind, and Mamekam Sharanam Vruja, becoming aware of the Paramatma Swarupa, and Sharanam refers to Nididhyasanam. With the Atma Aikya Nididhyasanam, one attains the Purnatvam, one attains the Moksha. In the nutshell, in the next slide, that we see, once an awareness comes through the life experience that the material life or samsara doesn't give lasting happiness, turn to Vedanta, Vedanta sadhanas, practice sincere karma yoga and upasana yoga, and then through Guru and Shastras gain Jnana yoga and become a Jivan Mukta. And this is the central teaching of Bhagavad Gita. Thank you, Hari Om.
Thank you very much, Dr. Divakar, for another wonderful presentation. The Gita has a sequential sadhanas and karma yoga, upasana yoga, and jnana yoga that will be explained to us by Dr. Sanjay Mehrotra. Dr. Sanjay, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Sadhanas which are glorified in Bhagavad Gita. So what exactly you mean by sadhana? The term sadhana comes from Sanskrit root sadhu, which means reaching one's goal, means accomplishing something. Now in Bhagavad Gita, various sadhanas or spiritual practices are talked about for attaining self-realization and ultimately the liberation. What is the purpose of the sadhana? The purpose is always to fulfill the Purusharthas. The Purusharthas are the goals of human life, and they are Artha, Kama, Dharma, Moksha. And Karma Yoga, which we have understood after going through Gita so many times and understanding the Gita, which has two goals. One is, of course, Artha and Kama. The next goal, which is Dharma, can only be understood by Jnana. And this will require to obtain knowledge, the highest knowledge. And for this, one has to ask some questions. One has to become a seeker. What are those questions? What is my true nature? Who am I? What would happen to me after death? And what is the true nature of Atma? These questions can be only answered by Shastra and Guru. Now, types of sadhana in the Bhagavad Gita, the desire to know yourself or the self-knowledge or the true meaning of life is the first step. And when you have that, you become a jignyasu or a mumukshu. But the seeker or the mumukshu, by the grace, gets a Guru Shastra Upadesha, where he listens to the Shastra or listens to a Guru, which we call as Shravanam. He introspects about the knowledge which he obtains thus. And after doing that, he has to do sadhana or nididhyasana to achieve the state of samadhi or the Sat Chit Ananda or moksha. So sadhanas are the practice by which one achieves the highest, whereas this knowledge not just intellectually understood, but practiced. We all know that problems of our mind arise of attachment. Whole background of Arjuna's inaction and not fighting the war, and the subsequent Gita, which was imparted by Jagadguru Krishna, is to describe the various yogas and sadhanas, which are karma yoga, jnana yoga, Raja Yoga or Dhyan Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. So there are 4 types of sadhana. One is Karma Yoga, which is right action with right attitude. Jnana Yoga, knowledge about self, knowledge about your real nature. Dhyana Yoga, meditation to remove the clutter in the head, the confusion in the head, the self-talking or the kinds of thought which you get every day. Remove that by quietening the mind. Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion and surrender to the Paraprakriti, the highest nature of existence. So what is Karma Yoga as a sadhana? After the Vishada of Arjuna in the first chapter, which was of course because of the attachment to his family and his Gurujana, when he goes to sharanagati to seek guidance from Krishna, Krishna describes that who is a jnani whose mind has become sthira, and explains the eternal nature of that Atma and what is the temporary nature of the body. What is the meaning of Karma Yoga? Any action which is done with an intent of Ishvara Arpana Bhava, and the results are received as Ishvara Prasada Bhava. Such action do not incur any karma phala, and hence is free from results which are either punya or papa. Yogastu kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddha siddhayo samo bhutva samatvam yoga ichyate. So Krishna is saying, "O Arjuna, abiding in yoga, giving up attachments and remaining the same in success and failure, perform actions, this equanimity is called yoga. This sadhana where all your karmas are changed to karma yoga. And once you are unattached to it, seeing all the living beings with equal attitude, you become equanimous, you become samatva, you are called a yogi." Verse giving the principles for karma yoga is in which is the most important verse, very well quoted. Karmanneva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala hetu bhuma te sango sattu karmani. You have a choice over action alone, never over results. May you not be motivated by the results of action. May you not have an inclination towards an action. A karma yogi now becomes an adhikari to obtain jnana, to become a jnana yogi. So now coming to jnana yoga sadhana. This requires shravanam of shastra with a competent guru, where you introspect and by contemplation on the knowledge which you obtain, you do practice. And this is called as nididhyasanam. So Krishna gives the highest knowledge, explaining the real self, Atma, is nirvikara, not subject to modification in our body. And this is the most important understanding with all the Shastras are giving, including Gita, that your near nature is that which is nirvikara. It is not subject to change. What is subject to change? The body, which is asti jayate, vardate, viparinimate, apakshiyate, vinashyati. While on the other hand, that sentience in you, which is giving you in-living principle, that part, which is what we call as Atman, is unaffected, has got no attributes. This understanding is the most important understanding. And understanding is the highest knowledge. When he talks about na jayate mriyate va kadachit, na ayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuya, ajo nityam shashvato ayam purano na hanyate hanyamani sharire. This Atma is neither born or dies at any time. It is neither arriving in existence at one time or disappear later. It is unborn, eternal, and free from decay and growth. When the body is perished, it is not affected. Now, once your mind has become, once you have understood what is the next step which you have to do, you have to clear your mind. You have to remove the clutter in the head, which requires some kind of meditation or a practice, which we call as the Dhyana Yoga. And this technology was provided by Patanjali in the part of the Ashtanga Yoga, where his knowledge has to be converted into Sthira Prajna, Dhyana Yoga, meditation and prana. And it includes, of course, it encompasses the 8 limbs of the Ashtanga Yoga, which are Yama, Niyama, Asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dharana, and samadhi to become a yukta, to become a yukta purush. Now, Krishna glorifies the Dhyan Yoga as the ultimate peace giver. Tapasvi bhaya adikah yogi jnanibhyah apimatah adikah karmibhyah cha adika yogi tasmat yogi bhava Arjuna. Dhyana yogi is greater than ascetic. He is considered even greater than Jnana yogis. Dhyana yogi is greater than karma yogis also. Therefore, become a Dhyana yogi, O Arjuna. So Krishna is directly providing the value of Dhyana yoga as an important aspect of our achieving the highest and becoming a sthira prajna. Now we come to the bhakti yoga, the path of devotion and love towards a God. Once a karma yogi has acquired the highest knowledge, and through nididhyasanam dhyana yoga with the grace, his mind has been now refined, bhakti becomes inevitable and he attains param shanti. Shabdavan shraddhavan labate jnanam tatparam sanyati indriya jnanam ladva param shantim acharine adigacchati. One who has faith, who has devoted and whose sense organs are under control and restrained, having attained this knowledge, he will attain supreme peace soon. Krishna's advice in the 18th chapter is the culmination of the sadhana, where clear instructions are given, which says, Manmana bhavamat bhakta yaji mam namaskuru mam eva yeshyasi satyam te pratijane priyaha asime. Fix the mind on me, be my devotee, be my worshipper, and surrender to me. You shall reach me alone. Truly do I promise to you, you are dear to me. This is what Krishna's instruction. And with this, the 4 kinds of sadhana, which is the karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, and bhakti yoga, is provided by the whole Bhagavad Gita. But we have chosen the important verses which I have expressed in my talk. Thank you. Hari Om.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanjay. We now come to the concluding presentation. Is Gita Upanishad Sara? We have heard this again and again. Sarvo Upanishado Gavo Dogda Gopalanandana Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gita Amritam Mahat. Additionally, at the end of each chapter, we hear this. Om Tat Sat Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyaya Yoga Shastri. So each chapter we conclude by saying that this chapter is Upanishadsu. It is Upanishad. Now, if you have to, we have studied the Gita, and now it is our venture to study the original source of the Gita. And if there is one Upanishad from which most of the verses of the Gita have come from, is the Kathopanishad. I would like to borrow some words from Bhagwan Osho, who had this to say about the world of Upanishads. We are entering into one of the most enchanting and the mysterious world, which is the highest as far as spiritual quest is concerned. Never before and never after has human consciousness attained to such Himalayan heights. The world, the days of the Upanishads were truly golden. The Upanishads are also called Vedanta because they come from the end portion of the Vedas. And because they talk about removal of our innate ignorance of our true nature, it is also called Jnana Khanda or Atma Vidya, or one's true nature, which is the same as the nature of God or Brahma Vidya. It has been said that you can break the words Upanishad. Upa means Guru Upasadanam, going towards a Guru. Ni means to sit down at one level lower than the teacher. Shad means to destroy all sense of limitations, all bondage, the sense of samsara and ignorance. Upa also means Atma. Ni means Nischaya Jnanam. And Shad means the one who takes you, gati, towards the knowledge. Upanishadic wisdom is not available for all for three important reasons. It is extremely difficult to find a student who is interested in the Upanishads. The Bhagavad Gita, you will find a lot of people who are interested, but the moment you say Upanishads, people will think it's very difficult, not possible for me. Second, to find a teacher who will be able to bring the Upanishadic wisdom is also difficult. And thirdly, the subject matter you will see is a shade more difficult. If you will see some of the most difficult verses of the Gita are Upanishadic verses, and therefore the topic is difficult. Why is it difficult? It is not something outside there. It is about our true nature. And therefore, this is also the skill of the teacher to be able to tell you what you're going to study is not something objective, but it is about you. And what is the tatparyam or the central message of all the Upanishads is about Brahman. Now, initially it is given as Paroksha Vidya, as something objective, something there. So we will see like, what is this Brahman? Where is it located? What is my relationship with Brahman? What is the nature of this knowledge? I will explain a little later. What is the method of knowing? And of course, we all need to know what is the benefit of knowing Brahma Vidya. When you say what is Brahman, Brahman means Sat Chit Ananda. Sat means that which exists. Chit means that which is conscious. Ananta means limitless. In simple terms, teachers will say that from which all things are born, that which sustains everything, and that to which we go back to. That is another way of talking what is Brahman. Where is Brahman located? If a teacher, if an Upanishadic teacher is asked, he will tell you Brahman is something infinite. And that which is infinite should be everywhere. If it is infinite, it should be in me also. And where in me? Whenever you say me, we refer to something very central, as in your heart. And the Upanishads ever speak about it as deep inside your heart, as in the cave of your heart. What is my relationship with that Brahman? Initially, Brahman is taken as objective, but then the teachers say Brahman is the cause. Brahman is none other than my true nature. Tat Tvam Asi. That we should know that we are not other than that infinite principle. And this always comes as a shock. What is the nature of this knowledge? Okay, this is something that needs to be understood because all knowledge can be of three types. Knowledge that is gained by, indirect knowledge. Supposing I want to know about Niagara Falls or about Kailash Manasarovar, I get this through various book knowledge or going through the internet. And this knowledge which is got indirectly about some object which is away from me is called Paroksha Jnanam. One day, if I have a chance to go to Niagara or to go to Kailash Manasarovar and see it with my sense organs, if the object is perceived directly through my senses, then that is called Pratyaksha Jnanam. Is Brahma Vidya Paroksha or Pratyaksha? This is the problem. Brahma Vidya is neither Paroksha nor Pratyaksha. Then we need a new term. What is that? It is called Aparoksha. It is my true nature, none other than myself. And that is why there is a totally different style of teaching Brahma Vidya as not an object. Initially, it is taught as an object, but slowly the teacher tries to say that which you have know so much about is none other than your true nature. And how do we get this knowledge? And for this, we need to go to a teacher. We need to go through with a lot of reverence to a teacher, and then the teacher will teach you, and that is what is called Shravanam. We reflect on the words of the teacher, which is Mananam, and then you internalize this teaching that is called Nidityasanam. And what is this benefit? We heard about Sthita Prajna, Purnatva, Tripti, complete fulfillment. So full, Atman eva atmana tushtaha. Nothing in this world I need because I am so complete. And more important, there is something called Paranta Kale. And when I drop this body, I am certain there is no question of Coming back, there is no question of rebirth because now I have complete dissociation from body identification. Now, coming back to the Bhagavad Gita, once in a while you will come across these verses. And in the initial part of the Bhagavad Gita, right in the beginning, when Sri Krishna wanted Arjuna to understand the essence, he begins with the Upanishadic Sara from verses about 12 to 25. And one verse is like this: Nasato vidyate bhava, na bhavo vidyate sataha, ubayor api drishtanta, anyo tattva darshibihi. Swamiji says this is one of the deepest verse in the entire Bhagavad Gita, because right in the beginning, Sri Krishna wants us to know what is called Atma, Anatma, Viveka, which is none other than the essence of this mantra, Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritam gamaya, which has come from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Now we are now going to study the Kathopanishad, and when you study the Kathopanishad, you will immediately come across Gita verses like this: Na jayate mriyate va, with small changes. What is kadachin now becomes vipaschit. You will see verse after verse from the Kathopanishad have been drawn almost directly, or the essence has come from the Kathopanishad. Towards the Nayam part of the 13th chapter, and you will have sprinklings in the 14th and the 15th chapter. You will again see the Upanishadic Sara, where Sri Krishna says, Nayam yattat pravakshami yajnatva amritam ashnute. You will attain to immortality if you understand what is Nayam, that which is worth knowing. Then there are verses like this, exceedingly wonderful verses, but they are difficult to understand. Sarvendriya gunabhasam, sarvendriya vivarjitam, asattam sarva britchaiva, nirgunam guna bhoktricha. Through sarvendriya gunabhasam, through all my sense organs, all the time, I am able to appreciate that Brahma Tattva alone. And that is why, friends, Sri Krishna has brought to us the essence of all Vedanta through in the Bhagavad Gita. However, if we have to appreciate this, we have to study the Upanishads. And when we study the Upanishads, these are the topics which are dealt in right from the beginning. You know, the student goes and asks the teacher, my lord, we have studied the Mundaka Upanishad. What is that knowing which everything becomes known? So too, we have a perfect student in Nachiketa, who meets none other than Yama Dharmaraja. When you see Yama Dharmaraja as Brahma Vidya Acharya, whom do you have the greatest respect for? We have the greatest respect for a Brahma Vidya Acharya. And when you see Yama Dharmaraja as Brahma Vidya Acharya, how can you be afraid of Yama Dharmaraja? How can we be afraid of death? Now, these are the potential benefits that you will get by studying the Upanishads. And that is why whenever you study the Upanishads, you will understand how Sri Krishna has so beautifully milked the essence of all Vedanta in the Bhagavad Gita. Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namah.
Friends, I seek your patient attention for an important announcement. Today, with this session, we have concluded both our Bhagavad Gita series, verse by verse, as well as DISHA. Next, we shall commence study of the wonderful Kathopanishad. Before this, we shall have a special session, as I mentioned earlier, to commemorate Guru Purnima. We shall be having a physical satsang and broadcasting the same on Monday, 3rd July. Details of the satsang shall be shared in our groups, including Telegram. Do not miss joining us to celebrate and express our gratitude to our gurus. Our gurus, Swamiji's Paramarthanandaji, Anubhavanandaji, Brahmaji, Shankara Bharatiji, Chidanandaji, all of them bestow spiritual knowledge freely, keeping in with our ancient tradition or parampara, and in return, Shishyas offer Guru Dakshina to express gratitude. Keeping with this tradition of Sanatana Dharma, it is the earnest wish of Param Vedanta, desirous of offering collective Guru Dakshina to all our Param Gurus on Guru Purnima. We invite your voluntary contribution. Bank details are displayed. I suggest you take a picture of the bank details for your reference. We are sure that the entire amount collected towards this shall be offered to our Gurus as gratitude from the whole of Param Vedanta family. Take note to make use of the Google Forms for us to make use of the Google Form link provided in the details to update the contribution details on Google Forms for us to account and issue a receipt. While I thank all those who have already contributed, I request you to kindly update the details on Google Forms. Thank you, Dr. Timmappa Hegde sir, Dr. Sri Ullas, Dr. Sundar, Dr. Anupama, Dr. Divakar, and Dr. Sanjay Mehrotra for your superb presentations. So perfectly capturing the essence for us to remember and as a guideline for us to practice in our lives. Most importantly, thank you, friends, for your active participation. Friends, remember to log in on Monday, 3rd July, 2023, at 6:45 p.m. sharp for our special prayer session on Guru Purnima to offer our vandanams to all our Gurus. Dhanyavada and Shubharatri. Om Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Sri Krishna.